Today, 21st May 2020, and we are going to find out a new topic. We're going to have a discussion regarding this topic. But before we start and write down and start learning it, a quick recap. What were our previous discussions in our previous classes? So it's all about market equilibrium, in which we learned how the prices of different products are decided. And we learned parallel to this about something about the price elasticity of demand. And today we are just moving to another, yet another topic, which is related to the supply, price elasticity of supply. So price elasticity of supply is again something to measure. Measure what? Supply, that how does it respond? So elasticity is all about the responsiveness of quantity supply. And why and how it responds? Since it's price elasticity of supply, we are going to use another word in this statement, that the response of the quantity supply is due to change in price. So this is how we actually define price elasticity of supply. So some of the objectives which we are going to go through today, and we're going to wind up session. So first of all, in our objectives, we have a definition to learn today. We will try to find out what are the degrees of price elasticity of supply, what are the various shapes, or let's say the types of price elasticity of supply. We are going to find out how we could measure price elasticity of supply. And the last but not the least, what are the factors that could determine elasticity of supply. So let's see all the objectives one in turn. So number one is the definition, which we have already wrote on the board. It's all about responsiveness of the quantity supply due to the change in price. Now, after this, our next content is what are the degrees of price elasticity of supply. Okay, this time I'm going to explain to you the way which I was talking about. Now, this is considered to be a thermometer, something to measure the temperature. Now, you know how we actually mention the temperature. It's with the degrees. Like today, the temperature is, let's say, 40 centigrade degree. So that's why, to have a little understanding that why we are using this content as degrees of price of elasticity, I have just suggested, this is one of my own way which I usually explain. You can't find it in any of the theories. So we consider it as like an elastometer. Elastometer. So just like a thermometer, it's like elastometer, which actually tells you the different levels of elasticities, the degrees or different degrees of the price elasticity. Now, where does the values actually start? The lowest one is, let's say, 0. And somewhere in the middle, let's say it's 1. And let's say on the top, it is infinite. So in between these 1 and infinite, and 1 and 0, we have another range of degrees. So let's find out that how we could understand and learn where the elasticity's values and what are the different degrees of it. So starting from the 1, we are very much familiar that any elasticity which gives us a value measured as 1, that is usually known as your unitary elastic, or let's say a unit elastic. Anything which is equal to 0 is known as perfectly inelastic. Anything which is any product which supplies is equal to infinite, that would be perfectly elastic. Now, between the range of perfectly elastic and unitary elastic, we have this whole range, which is also known as elastic demand, or sorry, elastic supply of any good. So it means that whenever we are going to measure it, and the answers is coming between infinite and 1, it could be starting from 1.1, 1.5, 2, 3, and so on, but less than the infinite amount, then it has to be considered as an elastic supply of the product. Any value which falls between 1 and 0, it should be in the points. Let's say point 1, let's say 0.25 and onward. If we have answers after calculating any schedule of price and supply, then we are going to give this range as an inelastic or less elastic supply curve. So dear students, the degrees of price elasticity of supply is usually spread into these 5 domains or ranges. So for your ease, what I did, I just actually dropped this temperature device, which is known as a thermometer, but for your understanding only, I'm giving it a name of elastometer, which actually tells you the different ranges of elasticities. So if it's equal to 0, it's perfectly inelastic. If it's between 1 and 0, it's inelastic. If it is 1, it's unitary elastic. Between 1 and infinite, it's elastic. And if it's completely at the highest most, and that is infinite, then it's perfectly elastic supply. So it's similar as we learned in the demand, price elasticity of demand concept. Now, how do we measure it, and how we could depict that which elasticity usually we get? For that, we will move to some of the another chunk over here, which is known as the measurement of the price elasticity of supply. And along with that, we are going to mix up with our third content, that is shapes and types of price elasticity of supply. So the types of price elasticity of supply are mentioned over here. These are the types, and also known as the degrees of price elasticity of supply. And now we will find out what kind of shapes do these elasticity curves usually have. So since we have 5, so we are going to draw 5 different curves, 5 ranges, 5 different curves of elasticity. So again, putting a price on this axis and the quantity supply on this axis. Let's see what are the different shapes we can learn today. So we may have an elastic supply curve like this, supply curve like this. We can have a supply curve of shape of like this. We can either have a supply curve like this. We can have another curve which can be portrayed like this. And the fifth one, I have to show you somewhere on this side. the supply curve can be of this shape, perfectly horizontal curve. Now, let's start with a very common and usual supply curve. This is your first supply curve, and let's give it a name as S1. Now, this S1 is actually giving us a situation where a change in price is same as bringing a change in quantity supply with the same amount. So if the price is increasing from P1 to P2, it's giving an increase of quantity supply from QS1 to QS2. That means the same amount of price is giving the same amount of change in quantity supply. So the response of the quantity supply is equal to the change in the price. So this has to be the unit elastic, right? Okay, so moving on to the next graph, just near to this, taking 2 points of prices. So we have price increasing from P1 to P2. You can see there's a very small change in the price, but there's a more change you can see in shape of QS1 to QS2. So there is significantly more change in the quantity supply as compared to the change in price. So response is greater. So this type of supply curve shows an elastic demand curve since the value has to be greater than 1. Okay, now in this shape, we see similar response, a similar type of change. The price is increasing, but there is a very small change in quantity supply, QS1 to QS2. So it means that a more change in price bringing a very less change in quantity supply. It means that it has to be relatively inelastic. So if the curve, now if you just see this as for the understanding, if the curve remains this way, it remains as a unit elastic since there is a same amount of change in both. But in this diagram, the curve is getting little flatter. This flatter curve is actually showing that the little change in the price is bringing more change significantly in the quantity supply. It means that there's more response. So it's like elastic. And in this diagram, the curve, when it was unit, if you just change its direction to anti-clock, like this curve, it's moving this way. So you may get a supply curve of this type of curve, and a more change in price will bring a lesser change in quantity supply. So the more the curve is moving to the right direction, rightward direction, or let's say the clockwise. I hope you understand the clockwise. It's moving to the, like in the shape of a clock. So more the curve is moving to the clockwise, it's turning or gaining a higher value of elasticity, or it's becoming more elastic. And if it's moving to the left side, or let's say it's rotating to the left side, rotating is the right word to use. And if it's moving, rotating rightward, leftward, or moving anti-clock, so it's relatively becoming inelastic, which means that its value is decreasing. Okay, now putting up all this or extending this rotation to these two curves over here. So this curve, if it's rotating more to the left, it's became extreme vertical. So extreme vertical case, we see that there is no change in the quantity supply, but there is more change in the price. So no change, it means that the value is decreasing. It's decreasing, right, from 1 to point something, and now moving towards to 0. So it's falling. So it's relatively becoming perfectly inelastic, right? Okay, and let's say if the curve is moving, this elastic curve is moving to the, or rotating to the right direction, or let's say it's moving to clockwise. So it might turn into this shape. So this shape is becoming more flatter, and this shows that the quantity supply is increasing from QS1 to QS2, but there is no change in price. That means the curve is becoming perfectly elastic. Okay, now these are the 5 shapes, or you may say types of elasticities, which we eventually put in our objective session, objectives of today's session. So now, how to calculate it? That's the perfect answer. Now, we have a very common formula which we are using. That is the formula method. I hope it's quite familiar. You're very much familiar when we did the price elasticity of demand, in which we have made a mathematical notion like putting Q over here, price in the denominator, again Q on this side, and the price in the denominator. So this time, this Q is turning into QS, which means quantity supply. And this is again quantity supply. But only change which we bring on the left side of this narration is a delta sign, which means change, which means change. So in other words, we can say that this notion tells us that always we compare the change with dividing with the original. We all know about that. These Qs, QS, and this P stands for the original amount of price and original price of quantity supply, whereas the delta QS and delta P are the change, the difference between the two values. We did this in the last lesson as well. So in other words, if we just see or put it this in a very simple word, we can put it up this way, that eventually the original the change and original is actually the way to find out elasticity. Change over original. Okay, now let's start putting some values over here, dear students, and let's see either we really get these answers or not. Now, this is P2 and this is P1. I'm going to put up the prices this time, and I'm going to put some values on this axis as well. So let's say if this is price 5, this is price increasing 5 to 10. Again, this is 5 and this is 10. Let's see what elasticity answer we get it. So what is the change, dear students? Okay, so what we see in both this way, change in the price and change in the quantity supply, we can see that there's a change of 5 over here and there's a change in the 5 over here. So 5 change in the prices and 5 change in the quantity supply. So the answer has to be 1. So which elasticity did we predicted? We depicted that this curve was unit, and unit answer is always coming as 1. Absolutely right. Now moving to this diagram. Now this diagram gives, if we give the value, let's say it's 5 increasing from 5 to 7, and the quantity supply is changing from, let's say, 5 to 10. So the differences which we can calculate, we see the difference over here is of 2. So we can put it in the denominator as prices. And let's say if the price, quantity supply is changing to 5, so the answer has to be 2.5. And the 2.5 is definitely falling between these two ranges, that is infinite and 1. So it means that this curve is absolutely, when it's greater than 1 but lesser than the infinite, that it has to be elastic. Okay, so you can try the same with all others as well, and they will give you the same answer. We will try the extreme cases right now. You can see the price is changing. Let's say it's 5 and the quantity is remaining 0. And we know that the quantity is on the numerator. So it means that when we divide 0 with the 5, the answer is going to be 0. So this curve is going to be perfectly inelastic. The last one, where we see the price has a 0 change, but let's say if the quantity is increasing from, again, 5 to 10, and putting 5, the difference of the quantity demand in the numerator, then the answer should be not 0, infinite. So that's why price is going to be a perfectly elastic curve. So these are some of the examples before you, dear students, through which we can find out how we can calculate the elasticities. We have that formula through which we can find out What I did for you today, I just put it a basic concept before you. It's about change over original. That is actually which gives you somehow an idea how we can calculate it. So through which this we can find out how the different elasticity values can be measured and how we can rank them into this range or degrees of elasticities. Okay, last but not the least is about what are the factors which turns our curve into elastic or inelastic. And for that, I will leave these two curves unchanged. There we go. So we all know that this curve is an elastic curve of supply, and this curve is an inelastic or less elastic supply curve. Now, what are the factors that can influence the price elasticity of supply? What are the various things which would make, or as a producer, how would you think that I would respond this way or I would respond this way? So let's have a quick review what we have learned so far today. So elasticity was all about the responses. So response means that if the price is increasing, our quantity supply is increasing in both the diagrams, or let's say in all of the three which we have raised so far. So it is happening in both the diagrams. The price is increasing and quantity supply is increasing. Can we see that, dear students? Yes, you cannot. But the question is, there is one thing which we see, that is the difference of the responses. If the price is increasing, are we responding great? If our response is more than the change in the price, let's say from P1 to P2, are we responding more? In this diagram, yes, it is. But in this diagram, price is increasing rapidly, but there is a very small change in the quantity supply, which means that there is a lesser response. What could be the reasons? Let's find out in the factors. So number one is that if the factors of productions are easily available. This is one factor which I'm putting up in on the board right now, dear students. Consider if the factors of production, who are the factors of production? The resources, and we know that they are scarce, of course. The factors of production are the resources, the land, labor, capital, enterprise. So the factors of production are something which shows that if they are easily available to produce, then we are more capable to endure. We are more capable to have inputs of these factors of production to have more output. Okay, but why it would happen? Definitely the price is actually instigating us. It moves us or stimulates us to produce more. So how we are going to respond is depend upon their easy availability. In somewhere, if the resources are not easily available, then your response should be like this. Even the prices are hiking high, but you can't respond great since you have lack of resources. Now, consider one example, like in Pakistan, we can say, do you think that the factors of production to produce petroleum products is easily available? The answer would be no. We lack in producing oil reserves. The factors of production are not easily available. So what happens? Even the prices of fuel is increasing day by day, but we are really unable to give maximum fuel. We are very less responsive since we are lacking to hold the reserves of oil with us. So It means that the factor of production or resources, their availability is a very important factor which plays its role in deciding the elasticity of supply. If they are easily available, yes, they are going to be available to respond more. And when they are not, they're definitely like that. Now, putting this example to, let's say, a country like a Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you can see that the fuel, is it very easy over there? Yes, they are, because the resources are easily available of crude oil. So they are, with the change in the increase in price, they can supply more, they can show more response. But similarly, in like Pakistan, if we talk about the supply of water, the fresh water to irrigate agriculture in Pakistan, easily available like this. But in a desert area like Saudi, it's just like that. So again, water is again another source. It's a factor of production to produce goods and services. Now, can you guess that fuel or crude oil and water, just a little thought for, pause for a thought, that why I'm just discussing these as resources. Which part of the sources they are? The crude oil. Yes, the crude oil is the source part of land. Same is the water. Okay, so it can be placed, these examples can be placed to some other, like for the labor as well. It can be put for the capital and for the enterprise, etc. Okay. Number two, what other things which we can see that the product supply is going to be elastic or inelastic? It depends upon the nature of product. The nature of the product. The nature of product decides that either it's going to be elastic or inelastic. Let's suppose the nature of product is based on more naturally. They are grown natural. For example, the agriculture products, any livestock or anything which relate to the farming, we can see that they are naturally grown. The nature of product is little slow. We can see that we cannot grow wheat, rice, or any food crops within days or within hours. So that means that those who have a nature of naturally growth, which have a nature involved, then they take a little time. So it means that mostly the agriculture products related to farming or anything, they usually have inelastic response. But let's suppose if it's of manufacturing. Now this is another, which is a little bit artificial. Like you could grab some raw materials from around it in the market, and you can produce in a very short time as well. So it means that manufacturing, what kind of elasticity usually have? Since they have the nature of product to be produced instantly, we have a more better and efficient resources to produce in a very short time. So that short time is going to decide that supply can be elastic with the increase in the price, the nature of the product. If it's, let's say, relates the secondary sector or the tertiary sector, let's say in the manufacturing, yes, their supply is relatively going to be elastic. Okay, so for the factors of elasticity, which we have learned throughout right now, first of all, the factors of production's availability was about the nature of the product itself, and sometimes it depends upon the natural, or let's say, a climate disasters. This is another factor which can affect our elasticity of supply. Let's say if the climate is very much favorable, that favorable climate can give us a very good response in some time frame. But let's suppose if there has been some climatic adverse effect in one particular season, that is going to create a disaster, and the product's supply might be go in not in its favor, and the response can be less elastic. Okay, time period. Sometimes the production is divided into time periods, that maybe some time periods are required to produce something. Now, usually we set this time period into three categories. We have one as short run, and then we have a long run. Now, these things needs a little explanation. The short run is usually considered to be a time frame where you are actually can produce goods within a year. This is one thing which we will learn. And this type of products which we require, or maybe a time frame of a whole year and onward. Some products are there which require a whole year and onward production. And there are certain things which we can produce only for 3 months or within a year, maybe 3 months, 6 months, or 8 months, etc. Now, these two types of time periods eventually decides that what elasticity or what response you could give for certain products. Now, let's understand further what is short term, if it's within a year. What type of products are there which are usually produced only for that set period of time, and that time, out of that time frame, you are unable to produce. Now, in this, usually you can take examples of some seasonal products. Now, we have a wide range through which we can say what are the season products. Let's say if you're talking about a very hot summer right now, and in this, there might be more demand of cold, or let's say ice. Ice is mostly demanded in many areas of production. So the production of ice is more available in a particular time frame, and that is summer. But in winters, you don't find it. So it means that this type of industry, which is working under this special time frame, is usually considered as a short-term or short-run firm. We have a couple of more examples like tourist industries. Like many northern areas, you can find out that the most of the time when there is a particular season, you find more production of goods and services over there. Like you will find many things which are related to the tourism. People are putting up their shops, let's say some their, we can call them their firms, which are eventually giving their services. But when the season is out, they aren't producing. So that means that tourism is another short-term production. Now, what about the long run? There are things which are produced throughout the year. We can take an example like beverage industry. You can see that the beverage industry is producing all over the year, maybe edible oils, the car or automobile production. These are some of the examples which shows a long run or a whole year production and onward, it keeps on producing. So what is the response of them? Definitely if it's in the short run, if we just put this in that what kind of, if the prices are hiking, if they're increasing, are we in a position to increase its output more, or we can expand its output? The answer is no. Relatively, its elasticity is inelastic since you cannot increase the factors of production in the short run. What do we mean by the factors of production can't be increased? Since you have land, labor, capital, enterprise. If you have to produce only for, let's say, 3 months, so you are going to hire things. You're not going to like expand your land if there is more increase in the prices of your good. Naturally, when the prices are rising, you're expected to increase more. You're expected to show more response, but you cannot, since your factors of prediction cannot be increased. Since your factors of prediction cannot be increased, so it means that the response will be slow. So it means that the short-run industry is going to remain small. It's going to have an inelastic response. But industry like Pepsi, beverages, Coke, edible oils, and those examples which comes into this, they have a larger demand and they can be demanded throughout the year, and they can yet be produced whole year. And let's say if the prices of their products are increasing, they have more capacity to increase, and that we can see in the real life. That if the Pepsi's demand is increasing, they are expanding, and we can see their expansion throughout the world. So it's a long run industry working for a whole year and onwards. So the more the prices are increasing of long run industry, we are more capable to respond, and that shows an elastic response. So two types of time period which we have disclosed in this discussion: short run and the long run, and they are also one of the factors which can influence the price elasticity of supply. There we go, dear students. So this was all about to sum up our elasticity concept today, and hope that you have any question. You can raise your hand or put in the comment box. If you like, I'll be available to answer your queries. And one more important announcement, that tomorrow you might not be having your classes. It's going to be a day off, and we'll be joining back from 1st June after Eid holidays. So I wish you all a very happy Eid and have a safe time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.